Okay. Hi. Hi, Allison. Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. We are here to record a conversation amongst people with lived experience and lived expertise about the difference between perinatal OCD and postpartum or perinatal psychosis, because I know it's something that comes up a lot. It can be a really confusing topic for both people who might be going through it and not sure what's happening, or people that are involved and it's a loved one, as well as providers too. It can be confusing and challenging to navigate. So we thought we would help chip away at that by sharing some of our own lived experience. That being said, trigger warning, sort of trigger alert, we do share our own stories that can have and include violent thoughts. That being said, why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves? So I'm Julia Alzoubaidi. I am the Postpartum Psychosis Taskforce Manager here at PSI. I have two sons. They are 2 and 6, both boys. And I experienced postpartum psychosis with my oldest son when he was 6 months old. Um, I also experienced, postpartum depression and anxiety and OCD too, just to make things confusing. I am really blessed. I made a full recovery. My husband and I are still married, and we had a second child, again, my 2-year-old. And I am also involved in PSI. I help to co-facilitate one of the support groups for those with a lived experience or survivors of postpartum psychosis. Allison, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks for that, Julia. So we are here at the Breaking Down the Stereotypes of OCD and Psychosis. I'm Allison. I have a 5-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. I used to live in Colorado, and then we moved states, and now I'm in California. Um, I have controlled perinatal OCD. I say controlled now because previously I had no idea what was happening. It felt like a masked new mom anxiety. And I have uh, taken the treatment paths of medication as well as therapy. Um, some of my OCD tendencies were contamination, checking and record keeping, avoidance, reassurance seeking. And throughout my path and my journey, I have then become a support group facilitator for the OCD parents group. And I co-facilitate that on Fridays. I'm also the international response specialist for Postpartum Support International.
Thanks, Allison.
Yeah.
Jess, would you
Hi.
go next?
Yeah, my name is Jess. I experienced postpartum psychosis back in 2015 with my daughter. She is 9, and then my son, I have a 5-year-old son. I did not experience postpartum psychosis, but similar to what Julia was saying, I also experienced OCD and anxiety, depression, just it is confusing. So that is exactly why we're doing this. Um, about PSI until I went to the conference in 2017. I had never met anyone with postpartum psychosis, and I emailed Wendy and I was like, Wendy, I'm hard of hearing. I can't hear anything. Like, in big audiences, can you hire like an interpreter? And she's like, yes, of course, we will do that. And she just so kindly and like graciously got money to do that. And then I was able to meet 2 people with lived experience of postpartum psychosis. And like that for me was huge. And they were awesome advocates too. So they like gave me hope that there was life after that, because I was deep in the depression phase after postpartum psychosis. And so they were like, yes, you can have another kid. You just have to, be proactive with your plan and all that. So it just like really going to the conference, even though I'm not a perinatal professional, that like gave me so much. So even just as a person with lived experience, I totally encourage you to go to the conference just to connect with people. So
Mm.
since then I've been a support group facilitator for postpartum psychosis. I did that for like 2 years. I started doing the deaf coordinator, like the deaf community coordinator. But I kind of stopped doing that for a while. And now I'm a part of the postpartum psychosis task force and do a lot of storytelling projects for postpartum psychosis. That's it. That's me.
Awesome. Thanks. I think one of the biggest ones I remember hearing is like how people will use OCD, like I'm so OCD about, and it's kind of thrown around that it's without it seemingly as significant as it is when you're experiencing it, or that it can just be specific to like liking things clean or being very particular about a certain thing. Which, I think it minimizes it for those people who really do experience it. Um, I've heard just as well, like the stereotype of it being that person just again around cleanliness or neatness is almost the same thing as OCD, without maybe really an understanding from like the general public about that obsessional piece, but just really looking at the outset, right? Or like the product of it, just somebody that's really neat or clean must be OCD or really punctual. Um,
Organized, super
yeah.
organized organization. I know somebody who candidly like threw around, oh, I put my markers in rainbow order. I'm so OCD. And I'm like, I mean, okay.
I mean, maybe, like if that's the way that you need those markers to be and you are not okay, like with them not being that way, then it could be a component of it. But I don't think it addresses the whole picture.
When I think of it initially, I thought of just like light switches, like flicking it on and off and having
Yeah.
a specific number. Like they needed to do it 6 times, or checking the stove, making sure they like physically check to make sure the stove is off 6 times. That is OCD. But if you have like scary intrusive thoughts and you're overwhelmed and anxious, that's like a completely different thing.
I just wanted to chime in that for me, like the picture of OCD, exactly what you were saying of when I thought of OCD before actually experiencing it, I always thought, oh, people who need organization, people who are very clean, people, and I'm like, I am the messiest person that I know. So you can have OCD, and that's not like that's not. It's a stereotype. That's not true, just to your everyone. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that being said, Allison, I'm gonna like hand it over to you and ask if, from lived experience perspective, what your experience of perinatal OCD was, and maybe a little bit more about what the realities are.
Yeah, so originally it was said like um OCD is like maybe 3 to 5% of new parents. And now research is saying more like 17% of parents have perinatal OCD. And it's such a misdiagnosed, undiagnosed disorder that it's swept under the rug. It's very misunderstood. So the realities are there are so many different subtypes. There are like a garden variety of different OCD subtypes that you can have. Often you can overlap them. There's like so much information about it on certain websites, but as a perinatal OCD person, typically you have certain anxieties and you have this vicious cycle that you kind of go through. And then you need to do this release, this compulsion in order to feel okay for your baby, for the well-being of your child, for yourself. I love to give the example when I do group of the car seat, and maybe the new mom has anxiety around driving. So when they put the baby in the car seat, they're like, okay, we're going to the grocery store, like already anxious, right? Their mind is racing. They put the baby in, they click them in their seatbelt, they get into the driver's seat, they're ready to go, and their thought comes back. This scary, intrusive thought of like, I didn't hear the click on that last buckle. I need to make sure my baby is okay. You get out of the car, you go back to the car seat, you check the baby's like, come on, mom, let's go, waiting. And you're like, okay, whew, relief. You feel that relief. They're clicked in. You go back to the driver's seat. What if I get in a car accident? All over again. Like just that constant anxiety, your mind is racing. And so it's one of the main examples we like to give with perinatal OCD. And then I had something else that I was really trying to say about this, and I can't think of it, but OCD. Oh, so previously being diagnosed, I thought growing up, I was just like really superstitious and like always prepared because I still am to this day, like always prepared and a little superstitious. Um, but no, that was OCD. When I was thinking like worst case scenario, which I still constantly do unless I'm very aware and medicated. Um, I didn't realize that that was OCD. So I run into a lot of new parents and new people that are like, oh, I've actually had OCD my whole life too. Or, oh, I totally had those like scary intrusive thoughts. Or I did these weird compulsions and I had no idea that was OCD. So there are a lot of people that are not diagnosed, misdiagnosed around OCD. That if you have been previously diagnosed with OCD and you go into a pregnancy or postpartum period, you're more likely to have perinatal OCD. And or if you have a close relative, like a mom, a cousin, aunt, somebody that's connected with OCD, you most likely will experience perinatal OCD. I was adopted, so I don't know my family history, but I most likely have that OCD in my family, like history.
Yeah.
Allison, that's funny that you talk about OCD and anxiety and of how like you feel like you had it your whole life of like obsessing about, things and having like worst case scenarios, because I was definitely that way growing up, and I would like play images over and over and over in my own head about things that could happen, things that would happen,
Yep.
phobias. And I would not feel better until I would like tell my husband or tell somebody, be like, hey,
Yes.
this is happening in my head. I just want to let you know. You don't have to do anything about it, but I just want to let you know. And then it would be like, okay. And then it would come back. But every time I said something, I felt better. But if I
Yes.
didn't, it would just build and build and build. And that was just before pregnancy. That was before. So that's interesting that you say that, because I had OCD too and never realized it.
Yes. Yep. And
Mhm.
you hit on a really important point in it. It's so mental. When we think of the stereotypes, we think of that physical, tangible person doing something. You see them flicking on and off the light switch. But OCD is the majority of it is in our minds. And so diagnosing it, expressing it like in that mental way, it's really hard to see. You can't really like, you can't see that. You can't explain that.
Yeah. And that reassurance seeking piece that even you mentioned, Jess, right? Like of having to tell someone, like for me, when I experienced it was having to like Google and feeling like I had to find an answer. And I didn't even know at the time that that could be kind of like a way of seeking reassurance, or almost not like a Google subtype, right, Allison? But like, right? Is that something that people that come to
There's
groups struggle
Oh,
with?
constantly. Yes. It's called like the Google Mom. And they're like, "Oh, I was just looking up XYZ." And it's like a research rabbit hole base. But it's very common. It's that reassurance seeking via the internet, and
Mhm.
a lot of parents experience this. I was about 8 months out with my daughter, and just constantly an anxious mom. I thought that that's what I was, because I was worrying about her. I very little sleep. Worst case scenario, just times 5. My hormones, everything. It was so much. And I had read a psychological thriller on my Kindle, and the main character was very relatable. And so I believed that, wow, we have a lot of similarities. And the main character ends up being a murderer. So then in my mind, I believed, like, what if I could be this murderer? Like, I'm very similar to this character. Like, wow, this massive thriller at the end, this twist, like, she's a murderer. Like, what? Like, that could be me. Feeding at the time, and I was looking down at my daughter and just imagining, like, murdering her almost, but it was me squeezing her neck until it would pop off. Her head would pop off. And then I was like, what is wrong with me? I'm gonna be a murderer. I thought about murdering her by, like, squeezing her neck. Like, this is not okay. If something's wrong with me, I'm going crazy. And I really needed a therapist from probably pregnancy, but I didn't seek one because I didn't think that's what I needed at the time. So I finally did get a therapist who spoke to me about different signs and symptoms of postpartum depression. So she wanted me to get medication, like an antidepressant, to really help me during this time of, like, hardship. And I went in to see my doctor, but they were out of town. So I went to a nurse practitioner, and they misdiagnosed me. They believed that I had psychosis. She wrote me a script for an antidepressant and sent me on my way. But then that night we had the psychiatric emergency response team, PERT, come to our house, knock on our door, and ask if I was hallucinating, hearing things that weren't there, and the well-being of my child. The next few weeks were following of doctors, nurses, and child protective services, social workers coming, meeting me, meeting my daughter, interviewing my husband, and trying to really understand if I had psychosis. I never worried that my child was actually going to be taken away from me. I was able to separate reality from, like, a hallucination psychotic moment, because I was never in psychosis. So I was never concerned that they would take my daughter. But it was one of the hardest things that my family and I went through. And yeah, I mean, it was a blessing in disguise, because in the end I was able to, like, turn it around into advocacy, awareness. And I want all of these new parents to know, providers to know, OCD and psychosis are very different, and the right diagnosis is just very pertinent.
All right, should we get into psychosis and sort of the stereotypes of postpartum psychosis? Again, one of a stereotype that's out there and is that it's rare, right? And this language that's used around it being rare, and so for me, it was really a thought of, like, well, that would never happen to me. Where, right, women or birthing people who have postpartum psychosis are violent, right, and can act violently. We know the research has sort of shown that that's not the case. There is an increased risk, and that's why it's still considered a medical emergency, but the vast majority of people who experience it actually don't end up harming their child. I think the stereotype is not that it's like this brief, temporary, treatable illness, but really that it's like a long-standing, very, very sick person that would have it.
I think for me, like, especially when it's portrayed in the media, a lot of times I hear people say, oh, well, she snapped. She couldn't handle it anymore. She didn't like her new identity. She didn't want to be a mom. So she just took hands in her own matter. You know what I mean? Or took matters in her own hands, things like that. Where it's like, no, it's definitely not like that. You don't like snap. It's, I don't know. That is a huge stereotype that I hear just from media, that we snapped. We just couldn't handle it anymore. Um, no.
No, which
Um,
implies like a weakness, right? You know, this
right.
like not weakness, but maybe this inherent like evilness or something. And
Yeah. Or like that we were jealous of the baby, that we couldn't, like that whole stereotype where couldn't handle the new identity being a mom, things like that. Like, no,
I heard of
no.
like lower socioeconomic status, like uneducated people or people that were like from the streets or something, just didn't have a good upbringing. And then they went psychotic. And they should have been in a mental institution this whole time because they have all of these horrible chronic illnesses.
yeah, we definitely like otherize it, right? Like it couldn't happen to me or someone I know. Like it lives over there, right? It's kind of like this population of people that are, yeah, right? The other, they're
The
sick.
others.
It's not me.
Yeah.
That it's always religious. There's always a religious aspect to
Mm,
it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and like sometimes there is, like I was definitely convinced that God and the devil, like I had a whole like hallucination about things like that. But there are a lot of people who I know who have psychosis and their religion was never involved. But then there's like a real sticky, you know, gray area there too, where what if people really are truly religious too? And that's just like normal for them to really talk about religion a lot too. It's just, um, yeah, it, you really have to kind of count on people who know you so well. And so I hope people will take take that into account. Like ask people who know them well, is this normal for your, for your partner or your bestie or, your daughter to experience this all the time, or is this new? I was also thinking too, like whenever things do happen, it's always about the like the mother or the birthing person. It's never like they don't never include like the partner and how they see things too. So I think that's really interesting too. It's always all on the birthing person.
Yes.
So I had my daughter in 2015. I had an awesome pregnancy. Like the birth went well even, except my interpreter didn't show up on time, so that was kind of annoying. And I had to be on Pitocin for a while, waiting, I say 4 hours for a while, waiting for that interpreter to come. So that was annoying. However, the birth was beautiful. Everything was great. Um, and like right after she was born, I had like quite a bit of mania. Maybe not enough for like people to really notice, but my mom, I remember she like brought me like McDonald's because I was so hungry after that. And she's like, "Oh my God, it looks like you like ran a marathon." Because I was up like taking pictures of everybody, like just so proud of like everybody holding my daughter. So there was that like kind of mania part where I wasn't just laying there because I was exhausted. I so happy. Um, and then like right from the beginning in the hospital, I would hallucinate that my daughter like wasn't there. I would look in her little like clear bin where she's supposed to be sleeping, and I would be like, "Where is she? Where is she?" And she wasn't there. So, it wasn't like in my head. It was like that really did happen. She was not there. So, I would definitely say there was some psychosis, some hallucinating things that would happen. Um, and I would also, I think this is a little bit of anxiety, but also I was determined that I was like nervous that I would had accidentally suffocated her. Like when I was like holding her, I'd like kind of doze off and I couldn't find her and I was afraid that I had suffocated her. Um, I was, that was more, I think, of the scariness, the anxiety of that piece. But, in terms of like the different things that I experienced, I kind of like you, Allison, was just like very nervous. I was a nervous mom, just like a nervous Nelly. I worried that she wasn't breathing almost all the time. So we go for walks with my dog, and I'd have her in the stroller, and I would like check to see if she was breathing, and then I would stop, and then I'd have to check to see if she was breathing like 2 seconds later and stop. So there was definitely a lot of anxiety. I would like other things. I would obsess about, like, kind of OCD wise, I would obsess about if I didn't pick up my dog's bone from the floor, that I would fall and trip, and then she would bang her head, and I would like, she would not do well. So every time I go, I'd look for the dog bone, I'd put it up on a shelf and like make sure that it was put away. There was just like this thought over and over. If I don't do this, she's gonna hurt herself. Um, and then just in general, I was like very much of a nervous Nelly when it came to like her. She lost her umbilical cord at the third day. Like, how is this? How is this possible? She's gonna go off to college. Like, it's gonna be, it was just like I was so anxious. And bath time, like the first time in the hospital, they take her to the bath, and I was just I wanted to go with her. I didn't trust anybody. I wanted to go with her and make sure she was okay. Um, and then like I would have a lot of intrusive thoughts, kind of like Allison was saying of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna hurt her. And it would be like I accidentally hurt her, sorry, not hurted. I accidentally hurt her. I accidentally suffocated her when I fell asleep, or but then those would transition to I did hurt her. It was intentional. I like those same visions in my head of like how you were saying, like you squeezed your baby's head and it popped off, or I would do very, very specific violent things in my mind and it would freak me out. Same thing. It would be like, what? How did I do that? How could I have done that to my daughter? So it's just like these images. So that was a lot of intrusive thoughts that I would deal with. But then eventually I believed that I was afraid to be alone with her. And I was afraid to be alone with myself because I kind of felt like someone was controlling my behaviors. Like if I'm alone with my daughter, I will drown her in the bathtub. I cannot be alone in the bathtub. So I was like, I never wanted that to happen, but I felt like someone else was going to make that happen. So I knew that that wasn't me at times. It was like, whoa, I don't trust myself alone right now. I did have a lot of depression also. I would cry a ton. At times I started losing interest in like things I love, like ice cream and we dance and all, like talking about getting a new house, like all of that was gone. My husband's like, wow, that's interesting. Like I'm sad. I want to try to cheer her up. So of all of those things were happening, and my OBGYN, I talked to her. I'm like, God, I'm having these obsessions. I'm afraid that I like suffocated her. I am seeing that she's not there in the morning. I'm not sleeping. So she gave me the diagnosis of postpartum depression. She gave me an antidepressant. So I took it and I went to a support group that she like suggested I go to. And like all of the things that the mothers were experiencing with postpartum depression, like some of it I could relate to, but others I'm like, this is not what I'm experiencing. I'm like seeing things happen. And then there would be things like my breast pump would talk to me and like tell me things. Or I would like be breastfeeding in the living room and they're like there right there, or there'd be people looking at me through the window. And they weren't actually there. I'd tell my husband, like, you need to close the windows. They're watching me through the windows. So I would like hallucinate that people were there, or hallucinate voices happening. And like my text messages, like it was all scrambled. I don't know if this happened to you, but it did not make any sense on my phone. I also, after I had like taken a sleeping pill, because I had not been sleeping like this whole time, maybe dozing off. It had been like probably 3.5, 4 weeks postpartum at this point. And so they were like, you need to take a sleeping pill. Like my family was like, you need to try to do anything you can to sleep. So after I took that sleeping pill, I like I can't tell if it was a dream or intrusive thought, but basically I saw my whole funeral in front of me, and I had committed suicide. I saw like everything that had happened. My students came to my funeral. It was just like this very like it happened. It freaked me out, and there was a voice telling me I needed to be gone, that I needed to end my life. So next, I went to the outpatient program, or not the outpatient program. Sorry, I went to the ER, and it's just like, this is happening. I am so scared right now. And so they were like, all right, you're gonna go to anxiety and OCD program. It's Thursday. We'll start you on Monday. You know, it'll be fine. But it was like the very next day that I started hallucinating that my baby was the devil. I had these delusions, like my baby is the devil. If I feed her, if I breastfeed her, I can't be doing that. I can't feed the devil. My husband's the devil. I had all of these, like, if I did this, something bad was gonna happen. So that's when my husband, my sister, my mom were like, ugh, she needs some help. And they sent me to the ER to get some help. And I thought I was dead. I thought I was dying. I was in purgatory when I was in the hospital. I just had no idea what was going on. And they admitted me to a psych ward. And that's when, like, I still had no idea what was going on, but they gave me antipsychotics. And after a while, when things were kind of making more sense, things cleared up so much better. All of those like images of being like my daughter being the devil and all those things were gone, which was amazing and wonderful. But yeah, I was in the hospital for 12 days and couldn't be with my daughter until day 10. It was so sad. I am glad I got the treatment though, because I don't know what would have happened had I not been on the antipsychotics. I'm also very upset that nobody ever asked my history, like my family history, because I have people who have bipolar disorder in my family, and nobody asked any of that. And it could have, not that everybody who has postpartum psychosis is bipolar or has bipolar in the family, but that's a huge thing. That's a huge red flag. They should have asked. I didn't know that I was bipolar until after my second baby. So yeah. Anyway, that was a very long list of things, but I think the thing that made it different for me was that I truly believed that my daughter was the devil, and I thought I was dying. I thought I was in purgatory, and if I did feed her, she was going to, like that would be bad. Something bad was going to happen. So anyway, that was kind of my story, with my daughter. And then I had my son had a really proactive plan. Everything was great. I didn't have PPP, thank God.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like Jess, it wasn't too long. And I feel like, well, number one, thank you for sharing that. Like that's, I feel like as advocates, we're used to sharing our story and then being, okay, well then, like that was my story, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot.
Yeah. I think for both of you, like really brave to kind of share how dark your thoughts can get and how scary, and what a scary dark place you can be in. But Jess, I think you did a really beautiful job of teasing apart for us, like experiencing those intrusive thoughts and that kind of that OCD, but then also when things started to escalate, and
One of like a good tip for super anxious people is to like kind of get out of that deep intrusive thought, is to think of something very logical. Like try to list the alphabet backwards starting at Z, or like count by sevens, or just trying to get your brain in a different track so you're not like constantly going in the worry what if rabbit hole. But I think if you're psychotic, you probably couldn't do that.
But yeah, and it does wax and wane. So there would be times where I could totally logically do things and be like, oh, all is good. And then there'd be other times that I was like, somebody's looking at me through the window, like my breast pump is talking to me. But it wasn't always. It was sometimes. That's what's the hardest part is it was so hard to catch the red flags from my family members too. Like they would be like, oh, she's okay, she's good. But then there'd be other times where they'd be like, whoa, this is off. That's hard.
Yeah. Right. And I think what's so like sad, but I think important is that for both of you, there were periods, right, of like trying to seek help, but not quite getting the right diagnosis, for Allison, like, and I think that's why it's so powerful and so, in a sense, like cool to hear both of your stories like this and compare and contrast them, right? Because I mean, for Allison, like being on the in one side and kind of being misdiagnosed as psychosis, and then Jess, like experiencing a host of perinatal, mood anxiety disorders. It's like lucky us, right? But then just like not seeing the psychosis piece until it was not too late, thank goodness, right? But until like you were very, very, very sick. Um,
I'm also convinced sometimes. I mean, I don't know. Like I had bipolar in my family and things like that, but also I'm like, I was misdiagnosed with postpartum depression, given an antidepressant, and it's known, or from what I understand, if you're getting just an antidepressant and you are bipolar or you have that in your family, that can actually spiral you into psychosis. Same with like the not sleeping. I refused to take my hearing aid off, which was part of the anxiety part. I always used to take my hearing aid off when I would sleep, but when my baby was born, I was like, absolutely not. So there's that portion too of like I just didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep because I hear everything. So that too could have caused it. It's just there's so many
Yeah.
factors I'm curious about.
Yes, there's so many like blurred lines, like we've said. Like I had a very huge long stretch of no sleep as well, but it was anxiety driven and like just constant. Like I also experienced the worry of suffocation. I worried my baby would stop sleeping all of a sudden, and just die out of the blue. Just so many similarities with that anxiety, that new parent, OCD, and then just a very clear separation of your experience. Like you knew there was like some other force. You were in a waxing, waning experience. Whereas I was like constantly on, I felt, or constantly just worried in that vicious cycle. Yeah.
So Allison, did you do cognitive behavior therapy, like CBT, I think it's called, where you had basically exposure therapy? You had to
Yeah,
watch things happen.
so I've learned a lot more about different therapy and treatments, and one of them is under the cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and it's called exposure and response prevention. So I did learn about that during my like therapy sessions, and I was slowly building up my tolerance around anxiety and my OCD. And my husband just took it to the other level and just would always make me so much more nervous. But he was doing me a favor just in the moment I was about to murder him. Like, this is okay. Dude, come on. But he'd be like, look, I'm pushing her too high. She's swinging in the swing. And I would be like, so nervous. And he's like, haha, exposure. I was like, great, thanks. Love you. A really great holistic way of treatment for OCD is meditations and tips and tricks like breathing and kind of like getting your mind out of that vicious cycle, like box breathing or focusing on like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, like just going down. And then I always like to encourage people to go to their public libraries, which sounds like kind of weird, but you can get like so many free things and you can build a community there. And there's like baby classes we'd like to go and attend. And then you can meet other parents or other caregivers that are like have a child that's a similar age. I also like to encourage people to like speak up, talk to other people about this. Social media, great sites are Treat My OCD and the International OCD Foundation. They have a lot of information and they have a specific page on perinatal OCD. So really good tips and tricks, websites, books. We got a lot of books too. John Hirschfield is very famous in the OCD world, and he has written several books, and one of them is about for families, OCD for families. So if you have a loved one and you want to share information like that, that's a great.
Inpatient for 12 days, and I got the antipsychotic medicine, but I had to stay on that medicine for 1 year afterwards. And that was just, obviously that was like a medical professional who told me that. But and I also did therapy with my son. I didn't get PPP, but I got OCD and anxiety, and I did outpatient program. I did cognitive behavior therapy, so exposure therapy, which was, I gotta say, it was so helpful. Very scary to do, like you were saying, Allison. It's stressful, but now I don't experience anxiety and OCD. A little bit, like a little bit. I still check the oven and things like that, but it is wonderful now. I'm so thankful I was able to do therapy. But one thing I did before I had my second kid was I wrote a letter to myself and just said, if in the event that you do have postpartum psychosis, like just know this happened before. These are people you can trust. You will get help. Like you will be okay. Like that was really helpful for me to have a tangible object that I could use later and open in my own handwriting, so that I didn't have any paranoia against anybody else. It was my handwriting that was helpful for me. What else? Meditation was incredibly helpful. Meditation apps were really helpful for me. And I really wish I had a peer support group. That PSI I know has that. I really wish I had that. But just going to PSI's conference and meeting two people who had it, that was incredible. And meeting other people who do climb out of the darkness, and just experience perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. It was like a community that really helped me see like a light at the end of the tunnel. But I will say, I really, really, really hope someday that they have mother baby units. I don't ever regret going to the hospital. I'm so glad I did, but we need that because that was just so painful to be away from my daughter. And it really did a number on my confidence of being a mother. So I'm forever going to advocate for that. That's all I would say.
PSI's supports as well, as a reminder, disclaimer, psychosis, if you're concerned that someone is experiencing postpartum psychosis, or you itself, it's a medical psychiatric emergency. So go ahead, but please, contact emergency kind of services, 911, 988. There's even the National Crisis Text Line where you text home to 741-741. There is the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline as well, 1-800-TLC-MAMA. PSI has a lot of resources as well. We have support coordinators, support groups that Allison leads on Fridays, right? The first and third Friday of the month. And then that's OCD support for parents. There's OCD support for moms as well. That is is it Monday?
It's
Tuesday,
yeah,
every
it's
Tuesday.
every Tuesday night.
And then PSI also has support groups for survivors of postpartum psychosis, for birthing people and mothers, as well as a support group. I believe it's the first Wednesday of the month for families. So, partners, loved ones that are touched by postpartum psychosis. There's also, PSI's website where you can go and get even more resources. I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. They have a provider directory where you can kind of go and find people in your area and your network that are comfortable working with people in the perinatal period as well. So there's lots of resources and there's lots of help and lots of hope out there. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here and for sharing your stories.
Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor, and it's good to make good things happen from what we experienced, you know, just help others through it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you for having us, Julia.
Yeah.
Thank you.